Hi everyone, this is Sai Teja from CSC AML. Today my topic is about the booting the computer. Let's get into our topic. Introduction. In computing, booting is the process of starting a computer as initiated by a hardware such as bottom or by a software command. After it is switched on, a computer central processing unit called as CPU has no software in its main memory. So some process must load software in its memory before it can be executed. This may be done by hardware or firmware in the CPU or by a separate processor in the computer system. Booting is nothing but the process of starting the system called as booting. For that, for the starting the system, we need by a software command. By the software command, the system process will be started through the booting. Restarting a computer is also called as booting. Booting is nothing but restarting the computer, which can be a hard rebooting called as when we get any disturbance in the system, we can uh, always choose to restart or reboot the system. So the restart or reboot is about which can be called as a hard rebooting. After an electrical power to CPU is switched off from to or on or soft, where the power is not cut. On some systems, a soft boot may optically clear RAM to zero, but both hard and soft booting can be initiated by hardware such as bottom press or by a software command. Booting is complete when the operate runtime system, typically the operating system and some applications is attend. In booting, we can see both two different categories. One is a hard booting and the other one is soft booting. In the hard booting initiated by the hardware such as operated by the button by pressing the power on or power off button. In the soft boot in the booting, the other one is soft booting. In the soft booting, by initiating with the software command, we can see shutdown or restart with the with using the software command. We can use this booting. What happens in the process of booting? Let's discuss what happens in the process of booting. Booting happens when we start the computer. This happens when we turn on the power of the computer. Starts the system BIOS. BIOS is nothing but basic input and output of the system. It makes the peripheral devices active. Further, it requires that the boot device loads the operating system in the main memory. In the process of booting, the when we power on the uh, when we turn on the power of the computer, it restarts. In the restarting, the system BIOS is nothing but the basic input and output system devices, which makes the peripheral devices active. In the booting, when we turn on the power, which makes the peripheral devices active and runs the system in a smooth way in the in the process of booting. Boot devices. Booting can be done either through hardware, pressing start button, or by giving software command buttons. Therefore, a boot device is a command device that loads the operating system. Moreover, it contains the instructions and files which start the computer. Examples are hardwares, floppy disk, CD drive, etc. Among them, the hardware is the most used one. In the booting devices, we can see in the booting hard booting, and the other one is the soft booting. In the hard booting, is executed by pressing the start button, called as power button. In the systems, we can observe that power button, and also the other one is the software command, like using shutdown command, or like using restart or rebooting. We can using these commands in the boot devices. Mainly we can use these boot devices or hard drive. Hard drive is most used one and we can observe by our computers. There are two types of booting. We all know that booting, now we learn about the booting. In booting you have two categories, two types. First one is cold booting. Another one is warm booting. We can observe through this small diagram. A cold boot is also called a hard boot. It is a process when we first start the computer. Other words, when the computer is started from the initial state by pressing the power button. It is also called cold boot. The instructions are made from the ROM and the operating system is loaded in the main memory. In the cold booting, we use the power on button or we can use the start button to turn on the booting process in our systems. And also it is the instructions are read from the ROM and operating system is loaded in the main memory. The other one is warm booting. Warm booting is also called as soft boot. It refers when we start the computer. Here, the computer does not start from the initial state. When the computer gets stuck, sometimes it is required to restart it, which it is on. Therefore, in this condition, the warm boot takes place by restarting button or using the control plus alt plus delete keys are used to warm the boot. These in the warm booting, when we are using any used data or when we calculating in the used data, sometimes our systems get slow and hang at that point. To overcome that point, we always choose to restart or reboot our systems. For that, we are using these small keys, restart button, or we can choose the keys called control alt delete. These help to overcome the system to run smooth in further way. Booting process in the operating system. When our system is switched on, it can be started by hardware such as button press or by the software command. A computer central processing unit has no software in its main memory. There is some process which must load software into main memory before it can be executed. Below are the 6 steps to describe the boot process in the operating system. We can see the how the boot process is occurring in the operating system. In the boot process, our systems does not have any command software command. So in the CPU, we mostly use the button to boot the CPU process. We can see 6 steps to describe the boot process in the operating system. First one is BIOS is loaded, and the next one is power on, like self test is completed, and the other one is operating system is loaded, and the next is system configuration is accomplished, and the other one system utilities are loaded. User is authentication. These are the 6 steps we can observe through the small chat. Now we are getting steps of that booting. Let's a small brief about that 6 steps. We can describe the boot process in these 6 steps. The first one is startup. In the startup, that involves switching the power on. It supplies electricity to the main components like BIOS and process. BIOS is nothing but basic input and output components of the system. When we power on, when before starting the booting, we have to get the switch the power on button by supplying the electricity to the computer. And the next one is BIOS power on self test. It is an initial test performed by the BIOS. Further, this test performs an initial check on the input and output devices. Computers' main memory, such as main memory, disk drives, etc. Moreover, if any error occurs, the system produces a beep sound. We can see when we use heavy work or some disk drives, and also some pen drives, which we used mostly when we use them. If any occur in that program or in that drives, the system produce a beep sound or getting disturbance in our processing the system. Loading of OS. In this step, the operating system is loading into main memory. The operating system starts working and executes all the initial files and instructions. When we start supplying electricity, and the next step is the operating system is loading into the main memory. The operating system starts working and executes all the initial files and instructions. Instructions are nothing but the commands which we are giving. And the next one is system configuration. In this step, the drivers are loaded into the main memory. The drivers are programs that help in the functioning of the peripheral devices. System configuration is nothing but the drivers are loaded loaded into main memory. The drivers are programs that help in the functioning of the peripheral devices, which helps to run the system very uh, smooth way. When we use heavy work also, it will functioning in a smooth way by using this system configuration. The other one is loading system utilities. System utilities are basic functioning programs. For example, volume control, antivirus, etc. In this step, system utilities are loaded into the main memory. Loading the system utilities, we all know the volume button. When we required any increasing in volume, and also the software which protect our system through the virus called as antivirus. These are some system utilities. These utilities are loaded into memory. And the sixth one is user authentication. If any password has been set up in the computer system, the system checks for user authentication. Once the user enters the login ID and password correctly, the system finally starts. The in the system user authentication, it protects for the any person who doesn't belongs to us. He not able to enter our system to say check our data. It protects and ask the user authentication, which we kept the system authentication like password or login ID. If we enter correctly, the system finally starts running smoothly. Sequence of booting. Booting is a startup sequence that starts the operating system of a computer when it is turned on. A boot sequence is the initial set of operators that the computer programs when it is switched on. Every computer has a boot sequence. A sequence is a nothing but how the booting process steps is going on. First, the bootloader will execute, then slowly it will turn it into boot device, and the next to boot sequence. Uh, in that first one is a bootloader. Computers powered by the central process unit can only execute code found in the system's memory. Modern operating systems and application program code and data are stored on non-volatile memories. When a computer is first powered on it, it must initially rely only on the code and data stored in non-volatile portions of the system's memory. The operating system is not really loaded at boot time, and the computer's hardware cannot perform many complex systems. The systems are system actions. The next one is a boot device. Boot device is a device which the operating system is loaded. A modern PC BIOS supports the booting from various devices. These include the local hardware disk drive and also the optical drive. The other one is a floppy drive, a network interface card, and a USB device. The BIOS will allow the user to configure a boot order. If the boot order is set to uh, we can see we can observe by using some local disk drives like a CD drive, hard disk drive, and network. In these three we can observe mainly the boot devices. Operating system is mainly loaded. When we use this CD drive, when we queue that CD, it will first of all it will reload it, and it will run the program, and it will check the any disturbance is occurred, or it will check, and it will put the total drive, and it will check the its function, and it will execute our information which we stored in the drive. And the next one is hard disk drive. Hard disk drive we can observe mainly in PCs. It will help to help in the process of central processing unit. It will help to store the data. When we power on our PC, first of all, it will boot the all hard disk drive. In hard disk drive, it will boot the peripheral devices, and it will enhance and try to activate the all the peripheral device which are placed in that PC. And also in the network also we can observe the booting system. When we turn on our network, it will boot the network, like diagonalizing the network functions, and it will smooth when we using that network, it will smooth in by booting. And the next one is boot sequence. There is a stand boot sequence that all personal computers use. First, the CPU runs an instruction in memory of the BIOS. That instruction contains a instruction that refers to the BIOS startup program. This program runs a power on self test called as post to check that device the computer will rely on our functioning properly. Then the BIOS goes through the configured boot sequence until it finds a bootable device. Once has found a bootable device, BIOS loads the boot sector and transfers the execution to the boot sector. Thank you all.